Now we're going to talk some people's favorite part, which is fragrancing your candles. Now, what most people think is that you can take any fragrance or any scent from anywhere and then make a really good candle fragrance, but you actually have to worry about compatibility with your waxes and candles in general to get good performance. So you can see here, I show you a couple resources. You can get fragrance from Candle Science and peakcandle.com, and they sell a wide range of fragrances that will go into a wide range of waxes. And in this section, we'll talk you through how to look at some various fragrance options, how to assess them for your waxes, and some troubleshooting when you run into trouble with fragrances, which can be very frustrating. So now let's go over to Candle Science, and you see the whole section on fragrance oils. And you can see they will break it down some places by what's compatible for candles. In this case, it's for candle fragrances. That way you know everything in here is compatible for candle usage instead of soaps or other things you may want to make. And you can see tons and tons of options of various ratings, as well as you can see the green leaves. And those are the ratings for how compatible they are with soy wax. In the wax section, we talk about how not every fragrance is compatible with soy wax, and you can see based on that rating how compatible it is. Now we'll click on one of them, in this case black currant tea, and you can see you can buy, what's great is you can buy as little as an ounce just to test it out for only a couple of dollars if you're not sure you even like that fragrance. That's a great way to get a little bit, make some tea lights and assess the performance or determine how much fragrance you'd have to use to get a really good scent for your candles or the wax that you're working with. But the great part is as you go and maybe you start to produce more and more candles, you can buy them in bulk sizes and really reduce your costs, since fragrances can be one of the most expensive parts of making your candles, depending on how much fragrance you want to have and how expensive it is to get the intensity that you want. And of course, many people buy candles for the fragrances specifically, so it's a very important part to consider when you're starting your own business or even starting to just work for yourself in your own fragrances to see which ones you like the best or which ones work with your waxes, your formulations for your own needs. And the next thing we can look at is there's more information down at the bottom. So if we scroll down to the second portion of the one below, you can see there's a lot more information we need to consider. Just like with waxes, you have to consider various other things. They give you some guidelines as far as usage in candles, but obviously that usage will vary based on which wax you're using. You can see the soy rating there. The higher, the more the leaves, the more compatible it is. The flash point, if there are any concerns with the flammability of the fragrances. And then one of the most important ones is vanillin content, which we'll talk to in a second when we actually look at the vanilla candle that we make in our making section. But you get lots of information here about all the different properties you may need, whether you're using candles, soap, lotions, whether you're using soy waxes, and then some safety information on all the fragrances on the bottom, which makes it super easy to use, where you have tons of data or information you can access whenever you need to. So now let's talk about in the demonstration where we make a candle, we're using this one, Very Vanilla, which is a great one because lots of people love vanilla, and it's really powerful. But one of the most interesting things about it, you can see here the vanillin content is fairly high, 5 to 10%, and that's really important because that means it's a pretty polar fragrance, so it's less likely to be compatible with your waxes. And when you see in our making section, there's a quick little trick that I use, and it's one of the reasons we chose to make a vanilla candle, not only because it's fairly easy, or at least a low amount of fragrance, but you'll see there's a little trick that when you're making specifically paraffin waxes, vanilla fragrances can be very tricky because they're not always compatible with your wax. And that's what you're going to see here in this section of the making demo that we pulled out specifically for fragrances. You may not have noticed it or paid close attention, but at the point where you're adding your fragrance, you can see we're just adding the fragrance here to the batch, weighing it out, or metering it out by volume and making sure it's the right amount. And then the next thing to consider is that when you make these batches, while they're still hot and melted, you want to actually physically be able to look into your batch and see whether your fragrance is compatible with your waxes or not. If it is, you'll be able to stir it around and have it go uniformly throughout the wax. And if it's not, then you're going to have some troubles. And then that's what this section is, to show you how to handle those including some experiments we'll show you in a little bit as to the science behind how to fix some of the issues that we're seeing. You can see as we're just adding it to the batch here, we're just stirring it up a little bit to try to get it to go compatible. But then next thing we pull out is fractionated coconut oil. So I think some people just think, again, if you just have a wax, you just melt the wax, throw your fragrance in, and done. But if you start to have some problems, you can't be afraid to use any additional additives. So in this case, if you have some trouble with compatibility of your fragrances to your waxes, you can use some natural oils, and you have to work out each one's for different fragrances, like fractionated coconut oil, which will help to make your fragrance be more compatible and solubilize into your wax. And I'll show you here as we take a look into the beaker here in a second. Try to stir it around a little bit. But what you can see when you look inside, see how yellow it is in the center of the aluminum beaker? But towards the edges it's clear, and now you can see it's just starting to to uniformly spread out because of the fractionated coconut oil. And the reason is because the vanilla fragrance oil by itself is not compatible with the wax, and that's why you saw it stay in the center. But once we had the fractionated coconut oil and then mixed all that in together, it made it a lot easier to disperse throughout the wax. And if you didn't pay attention to that or look at that, you're going to have trouble with your candles in either not being uniform or not having the amount of fragrance, or having the fragrance potentially sit at the bottom of the candle and not be able to be smelled when you first light it. We're going to play this again one more time just so you can kind of see it one more time, the effect, because it's very important. Then we'll go into the next part of the lab demonstration to show you exactly the science behind what happened. But like with any fragrance you're working with, as you go and you weigh out or take out the specific volume you need for the amount of wax that you're making, you can't just, the good part of vanilla is you can see, has a very golden color. Some fragrances you'll work with will be a lot clearer in color, which will be harder for you to really see if they're getting uniformly dispersed within your waxes. Luckily for us in this case, which is why it's a great demonstration to look at, vanilla is kind of a darker yellow color, a little more golden in color, which allows us to see the potential incompatibility a lot easier. So we've added the fragrance to the beaker, try to let it sit around. What's going to happen is it's not going to be compatible with the wax, so it's going to kind of clump together, fall to the bottom into the center, which is what you'll see in a minute as we take a look into the beaker. And seeing that behavior, we have to try to fix it and add something to it. And this is where you can't be afraid to add other things to your waxes, like natural oils. In this case, fractionated coconut oil is a very good natural oil to add to your batches to bridge the gap between your wax and your fragrances to get them more compatible. So in this case, generally speaking, you can go from how much natural oil you should use. If you don't know, I would start with a 1-to-1 volume. So if you're using either 2 milliliters of fragrance or 2 grams of fragrance, whatever the case may be, you should try using that same amount of natural oil. You don't want to go too high in natural oil because it can really suppress the fragrance and really mute out the intensity. So you don't want to go all the way to using 3, 4, 5 times. But let's look again. See the center? See how yellow it is? That's because the fragrance oil is having trouble. And now that we've added the fractionated coconut oil and now we stir it some more, you'll see that it does actually start to become a little more uniformly dispersed within our wax. And that's how we now know, okay, once we pour the candle, we're going to get a good fragrance distribution within our candle. That way, as soon as we light it, we will get a good fragrance out of it. And this is something you should consider with as you work with every new scent or change your waxes. You should always pay attention to this and see what you need to do to get your fragrance or your fragrance combinations, because in some cases you use multiple fragrances to get them work with your waxes. So now let's do a smaller a demo we can do at a room temperature that kind of shows the same effect without you having to melt up hot waxes. So as we talked in some of the wax additives section, you can use things like mineral oil to cut your waxes or to make them more softer waxes. So in this case, we're going to use liquid mineral oil and pretend that it is our molten wax because we know that they are fairly compatible and they work well together as a proxy for paraffin wax. And we'll kind of do the same demo now live in these glass vials to make it a lot easier. So in the vial on the left, we're going to add some mineral oil, about half a milliliter of mineral oil into the left vial. And in the right vial, we're going to add the same amount of mineral oil, but then that's going to be the one where we show you the benefit of adding fractionated coconut oil to that vial as well, to show you how it can make your fragrance more compatible. So in this case, 2 milliliters of mineral oil going into each vial. And then now we'll close up the mineral oil, and we'll leave the left vial as is without just the mineral oil before we add the fragrance. That way we know that that behaves as if we didn't add any fractionated coconut oil. That would be our control side. Now we're going to add, like we would, as if we're adding to our candle batch, pretend that the mineral oil is your molten wax, already liquid and clear, and now we add half a milliliter of vanilla fragrance into each vial, and you can see already how incompatible the vanilla fragrance oil is with the mineral oil. It is falling to the bottom of the vials because they are not compatible. The vanilla fragrance and its high vanillin content is way more polar compared to our very non-polar paraffin wax, or in this case, mineral oil. And the effect of that is that the fragrance oil does not want to be dispersed or mix into the mineral oil by itself. And this is where we need to, well, be aware of this, see this when it happens, and react to make changes. And I think this is one thing that people don't think about doing. They say, oh, I have this great fragrance, and I love it, but it just doesn't work out very well, so I can't use it, or they get frustrated, or they give up. But in this case, there are things you can do from a science standpoint to actually still make it work. And in this case, by adding just an equal amount of fractionated coconut oil, same amount as we did, half a milliliter, same amount as we did with the fragrance. And then now we're going to see is we're going to shake these up as if we were mixing them in our beaker or a pitcher or whatever container pot you may have in your kitchen. And now you can see in this case, and we'll do it here just base case, you can see now instead of sitting on the bottom, that fragrance oil is really dispersed throughout the vial on the right side. It's not perfect, and you'll see as we do some time age afterwards, it doesn't last forever, but it does make it a lot easier. So now we've shaken up the one on the left too. So if we just watch them for a little bit, you can see, and we'll do some time lapse in here, that the vial on the left, the fragrance is starting to fall out again. It takes a little bit, it takes a few, a minute or so just to show it, but it's starting to fall out and it'll start to collect on the bottom. Whereas the vial on the right, you can see it still is maintaining fairly uniform distribution of our fragrance oil. And that's because the fragrance oil, being a little more polar, actually does like the fractionated coconut oil a little bit more than it, or a lot more than it likes the mineral oil, just like it likes it more than your wax. So in this case, we're using the natural oil, fractionated coconut oil, as a bridge between our fragrance and our molten wax. And now you can see on the left or on the bottom, you can start to see the collection of your fragrance oil falling out to the bottom. On the right side, it is not doing it, or doing it significantly slower, because we've made an incompatible fragrance oil more compatible with our wax just by adding a little bit of fractionated coconut oil. So I can't stress how many times you may run across this problem, especially as you're looking at different waxes or looking at new fragrance oils or combination of fragrance oils, or in some cases using too much fragrance oil for each of your waxes. You're going to start to see some of this effect, and it's something you need to look at and pay attention to. And this is one of the best ways you can troubleshoot it to really save it. And it can be a competitive advantage versus other people selling candles. If this vanilla scent is selling really well or expresses really well in a paraffin wax, and people down the street or other people trying to make candles can't get it to work with their waxes because they don't know these troubleshooting tips and tricks, they're going to give up, or they're going to waste a lot of money. Whereas you know that you can use additional additives to troubleshoot it, like natural oils in this case, It will help you save the candle, save the fragrance, and save a lot of money from having to just keep playing around, figuring out what's going wrong. So now we can see we've had a little bit of a time lapse, an hour or so, to show you that on the left side you really settle out the vanilla fragrance oil, but on the right side it's still fairly well uniformly dispersed. It's not going to be perfect because, again, there is an incompatibility, but at least by doing this it allows you to maintain that compatibility long enough to pour your candle, make your candles, and have an evenly dispersed fragrance throughout your candle. That way, when you burn your candle, you get this great consistent vanilla scent throughout the life of the candle, rather than even having to be completely on the bottom or not even able to use it, because once you've poured out your candle, the fragrance is still at the bottom of your pitcher or your beaker, whatever you're working with, or only in, especially if you're making multiple candles, it may be only in one of the candles, but the first 5 candles you poured, it didn't make it at all. And then show you another thing to consider as you work with compatibility of fragrances. You can see a candle that's been burning for a long time, a little tricky to see, but that top layer is a little bit discolored, a little more brownish versus the white candle. And that's either due to a combination of the burning of the fragrance, and the heat of the fragrance can change the color over time, or if your oil is not completely uniformly dispersed, you can get some separation of the fragrances. In this case, it's probably most likely due to just having lots and lots of hours of heat and burn on your fragrance. So you may want to dye this type of candle to prevent this from happening or reduce the effect of it over time versus a clean one. Now, some people will ask me a lot of times, well, what about natural or essential oils, especially for those who may want to work with natural waxes like soy? They always say, oh, I'd like to look at natural or essential oils. And here's our, we're going to do a quick little section here now on natural oils because we get asked about it so often. So you can go to many resources, get natural oils online. Here's one that I actually like. It's called Vetiver, and they do have some other fragrance oils that you can use, but they also have some natural essential oils here. You can see you got some cedar wood, you've got some amyris, and so forth. So you can get all these natural essential oils, and if you're working with natural waxes or soy waxes, it may be a very easy leap to say, oh, I would like to have natural essential oils in my products. Truthfully, I would say do not start there. Work your way and gain your experience with other actual candle fragrance oils and all those tips and tricks we just went through to make sure the compatibility, and then also test out the fragrances for how intense they are. In general, essential oils are significantly more expensive. The two main problems with essential oils are they're significantly more expensive than other candle fragrance oils because they're more natural. So you're going to end up paying way more for those, maybe an order of magnitude. So instead of $1 per ounce, you could pay $10 per ounce or even more for natural fragrance oils. And in general, generally speaking, the fragrance oils for candles are designed to work well with candles, and not necessarily natural essential oils they just may not naturally work well with candles. So you may find is a really great smelling natural oil, and when you put it into a candle, you get really disappointed. In general, significantly less fragrance intensity with a natural essential oil than you would expect versus a fragrance oil that is made for candles. But you may need to use a lot more of it than you would a regular candle fragrance oil because of the fact that it's not naturally made to work great with candles. So I think that's why you shouldn't start there, because it is going to be more expensive and you may get disappointed. That's not to say that you can't work your way into finding some combination of a wax and certain essential oils that work great. But compared to, let's take a look, like the black currant tea we showed you before, it's like $2.41 for an ounce. Or as you get all the way up to, almost a pound, you can get down to even $1 an ounce when you buy it in fairly large bulk. But when you go to essential oils, and there are lots of great options out there, let's scroll through and see which one here we want to take a look at and see what the price is. Let's just take a look here. So this is a Western Red Cedarwood Essential Oil. And you can see now if we go to an ounce, instead of being $2.41 an ounce, it's $23 an ounce. So it's literally 10 times more expensive for this Western red cedar essential oil than you could a fragrance oil for a candle. And that's where I think lots of consideration needs to be taken care of. And this is a tip and trick I would give you, because you could waste or spend a lot of money thinking you're going to get this great natural essential oil candle, only to find and wait. If you need to use an ounce for your wax or for half a pound of wax, you're going to spend $23 for one candle to find out that it is not compatible, or you're going to be very disappointed with how strong the scent is, and then you may either have to use way more to get the same effect as a regular fragrance oil, or you're just going to be very unhappy with it. So that's something that you need to think about as you start to get into the naturals. And I think, as we mentioned in the wax section, one thing that you need to think about is that most people tend to want to use natural oils and more natural waxes like soy wax. It's probably less likely, it still works really well for people to use a paraffin wax with a natural essential oil. But if you put it into a soy wax, you can have the natural wax story with a natural fragrance oil. And as we mentioned in the wax section, soy waxes are going to even have a harder time to express than regular fragrance oils. So you're going to have to use even more, or find the fragrance performance even more disappointing. But in general, I do love natural essential oils. I think they are great, and I would just highly recommend that before you start working with them, you spend your time working with fragrance oils. Get to learn them at their very low cost, very inexpensive, how to put them together, how to make them work with your waxes, and then how to troubleshoot those issues like the ones we talked through. And then once you've got that experience, then you can start to say, okay, I would like to try to work on some essential oils and see if I could get one specific essential oil. Maybe you add that to your lineup later. You have a vanilla scented candle, whatever else your other favorite flower scented candle, so forth, and then say, okay, now I'm going to add a natural essential oil scented candle. But that way you spend all of your development time and effort and energy trying to get that one to work, rather than being really frustrated, just buying a bunch of, saying, okay, I'm going to do my whole lineup. I'm going to buy 4 or 5 different natural essential oils and spend, literally, you could spend hundreds of dollars to do so, just to make a candle or two of each of them, only to find it's very disappointed. So I want to make sure we cover natural essential oils in this section, because we do get lots of questions about them, because they are very popular, and I can't argue with the natural fragrance trend or natural trends in general. But there are some technical considerations that we need to think about before we start to use it in our candles. And I think that this can save you a ton of money and a ton of frustration, because I have spent time burning candles with some great natural oils, only to be incredibly disappointed with the performance of them, or the lack of fragrance that I'm getting from them. But out in general, there are lots of places out there, like Vetiver, where you can look at and get some oils and try it for yourself.